All right. Welcome, everyone, to today's Be Well Lunch and Learn with Dr. Tammy West from CureLink, SupportLink, our EAP program. She'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end, but we are so excited to have her here today to talk about healthy workplace relationships, developing supportive connections. Before passing it over to Dr. West, I want to remind you that these sessions are recorded. So if you're unable to stay with us for the entire session, you will be receiving a follow-up email that includes both the recording link and the PowerPoint slides. Also, if you have any questions or comments for Dr. West, feel free to use the chat box or the Q&A features, and we will get to as many as time allows for. So with that, welcome, Dr. West. I don't believe you've been here with us before, but good news is you'll be here with us for the next 3 months.
I,
I'll turn this over to you.
I know, I'm so excited. So yes, I'm so glad you all are here. Welcome. I am coming to you from just north of Nashville, Tennessee in my home studio. So if you were following Helene, which we were just talking about, it's East Tennessee that receives such the bad part of this weather. But my former work experience, the boring part is just that I taught high school for 10 years. I was in sales and training for a while, director of sales and training. But here's where I've learned the most about healthy workplace relationships. I am going to share a story with you, and I have the chat box open. So, it only comes to us. I will read as many as I can. I don't know that I'll read them all out loud, but I want you to think of a relationship at work that you would like to improve. That's really what I want you to think about this whole time. Or let's say that right now everything at work is great, but you're thinking about personal relationships, right? I mean, we talked earlier about the holidays coming up, and maybe you're going to have to spend time with family or friends, or so keep one in mind today. I think will be the most helpful because whatever skills you learn during that one relationship, you can transfer them all over the place. But at work, okay, we are going to focus really on work things here for the most part, but when we don't have healthy relationships, we don't serve our customers. And our customers could be, for you all, it could be many things. It could be patients, it could be family, it could be each other, it could be other staff. When we think about customer service is not that that's the topic here, but it's serving everyone who works together. And when we aren't healthy in our relationships, we aren't serving people. This was one of the most important lessons I've ever learned in my life about healthy workplace relationships. Now, I'm going to ask you to answer a couple of questions here. And I've heard that you're very interactive, no pressure, but that's what I've heard. So this is actually a picture of me a lot of years ago. But when I first left teaching, I left in 2005. Yes. And I wanted to be a speaker. I grew up with debilitating mental health challenges, and I spent time in a psychiatric hospital in 1995. So I've spent 20 years traveling around the world, talking about emotions and mental health and relationships. But when I left teaching, the first thing I did was to work with a seminar company. Some of you all may have heard of Fred Pryor, Skill Pass Seminars, National Seminars. They're just generic seminar companies. And I traveled all over the country and the world speaking with them. But the way it worked was this. Sometimes I would do a topic called a conference, and a conference meant there were two trainers. So I would fly into an airport on a Sunday. Most of the time, I would meet up with that second trainer, and we had never met before. We would jump in a car, we'd get the car together, go to our first hotel. So we had separate sleep rooms, but other than that, we were together the whole time. So we would come downstairs the next morning, set up the seminar room. Then we would train together all day. Then we would break down. We would get back in the car, drive to the next hotel, and we would do that all week. So let me see some emojis or thumbs up, or do you see how that could be a setup for some difficult relationships because you're together almost 24/7 and you don't know each other? Do you think? What do you all think? And this gives me a chance to know if you're hearing me, if my chat box is working properly. Maybe it's the question box that you're posting in. Let's see. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Okay, there we go. I've got some faces coming up. All right, great. So thumbs up, thumbs up. I do not feel that I would have a problem. Yikes, it could go either way. Wouldn't necessarily be the ideal work setting because you don't know each other. All right, so here's what happens. I meet up with this woman. for the first time. We had never worked together before. Okay, thank you. Now you're all giving me your questions and your thumbs up. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so we meet up, and it is obvious that we are not going to have a great relationship. She doesn't like my GPS. She doesn't like the books that I chose to sell from the back of the room. That was one of the things we needed to do. She didn't like the shirt that I was wearing. Wednesday comes. And so we're doing a women's conference on this particular week. Wednesday comes and we're training together, and then we describe breakout sessions. There's about 100 women at this conference. I tell them what mine will be, and mine is was emotional, managing emotions. She talks about hers. Hers was assertiveness training. And then we take a break and they could go wherever they wanted. Well, I start my session or get ready to start my session. My room is packed, and she comes walking in with a chair and says, well, no one came to my class, so I'll just join you. So about midway, this is what I used to say to people. Well, I still do, but I don't work with those companies anymore. But I would say in my class, I would say just like this. I would say, who will engage me in a difficult conversation? So what I'm really saying is be mean to me, be difficult to me. And no one ever immediately raised their hands because I had to lighten it up a little bit. Her hand goes straight up. And she says, in front, now the men on here may not feel this as much, but just try, okay? So she says to me in front of 100 women, yeah, what's up with your hair? Now, the women knew that this was not planned, because what do you think happened to my face? It gets red. Now, I'm going to give you specifics about this later, but I paused for a minute, and I had been studying a book about words, a book about language and communication. And I remembered a phrase, and I said, what would make you ask me something like that? And I was so proud. I was like, okay, I managed this. But then she said, I don't know, turn around. I think you look totally unprofessional. So I paused, found another phrase, and I said, I do want to hear what you have to say, but not the pot shots. Now, as I go into, I love to lay some groundwork. I want you to think about relationships. So I would love for you to tell me in the chat or the question box, why do you think this happened? Like, why did she behave this way in that room? So I'm going to let you think about it and write, and I'm going to do a couple housekeeping things. I do want to make my disclaimer. There's two disclaimers I want to make. The first one we've already kind of seen. This presentation is put together for you by Support Link. I love all of the things that we do, but the opinions, the research that I'll talk about, the background, the takes, that's all me, not necessarily the company. The second, and when you get the PDF of this, there will be a few things that won't be in there. For example, you don't need a picture of me, so that won't be in there. And I'll try to alert you when that happens. Second disclaimer is, as much as I hope and pray before I do webinars that you will feel like this is advice just for you, it's really intended to be an overview. It's not intended to say, this is what you need to do. It's not therapy. It's none of that. But at the end, like you heard earlier, I will make sure you know how to access resources that are just for you. All right, now let me see what you all have said. Jealousy, insecurity, jealousy, jealousy, insecurity, insecurity. She was mad. She's a miserable person. Trying to think than I was responsible, especially now that, gosh, yes, that's a lot. She was jealous, maybe insecure, maybe jealous. She felt threatened. Okay, and let me go to the question box because I did not see that part. And then over there, well, oops, we have jealous, intimidated, all about appearance, not about she was upset. So I'm seeing a lot of you think it was a jealousy thing. Now I will wrap this up, but I hope that you have thought of a relationship that you would like to be better. Because listen, here's the thing, we were not serving those women. Am I right? We were not serving those women. They could tell that we didn't have a good relationship. They were there to learn and grow, and they saw the conflict between us. Our valuations weren't good. It was a really difficult thing. So here's what we're going to do in the next 40 to 45 minutes. I'll leave a few minutes at the end for Q&A that you might not have thought about, but definitely, put those questions in there as we go along. First of all, my doctorate is in discursive psychology, and we study words. So if we're going to talk about what a relationship is, we need to define it. Secondly, understand intimacy, and I'm going to tell you, I'll get ready because I have a lot of disagreement on some of this and this issue of intimacy. So be ready. View relationships from a system perspective. It isn't just about you and the other person or me and this other woman. It's part of a bigger system, right? And how that system helps us or hurts us. Recognize components of healthy connections. So there are certain things we can look at to see whether those connections are healthy. And finally, what about barriers? Sometimes there are barriers and we want to be aware of them. We don't want them to just be silent. All right. So let's think about, first of all, what a relationship is. I mean, there's an emotional, when we think of relationships, oftentimes there's an emotional context to it. But really, the word relationship means that two things are connected, or two or more things are connected, or concepts are connected, but they are related to each other. So this other woman, we're going to call her Sam. Sam and I had a relationship because we were connected. We were connected by work. We didn't necessarily have a healthy relationship, but we had a relationship. So think about your person and whatever it is you're trying to work on. You have a connection. What is that connection? Is it work? Is it home? Is it supervisor, employee? Is it colleagues? And why are relationships important? I just started a field of study, and I would love for you all to just like thumbs up or yes or no. It's called positive psychology. Has anybody heard of that? Positive psychology. And some people, it's not toxic positivity, but positive psychology is a field of study that asks the question, how can we look at what's going well in our lives and build on that? Classical psychology is necessary. Classical psychology asks the question, what's wrong and how can we fix that? Which is kind of what we're doing here, right? We're looking at how do I take relationships that may not be healthy and make them healthy, but also how can I take what's working and grow it? And there's 5 pillars of positive psychology, just 5, which I won't go through them all because it's out of the scope of this. But the first one that's on your list here is one of those 5 pillars. Healthy relationships fulfill a basic human need. So it doesn't matter whether you are more of an introvert, more of an extrovert, it makes no difference. Some of us need more time with people. Some of us need less time with people, but we all need people to a degree. So it supports our holistic health. On every single webinar that I do, that is about mental health or emotions or anything like that, there is a component that says have healthy connections, every single one. It enhances your mental and your psychological growth. Without relationships, we don't grow. It combats loneliness. You know, when we know that as people get older, if they lose their spouse, that sense of loneliness can cause to a decline in health. None of us wants to be alone all the time. And it just provides stimulation. So one of the things that I talk about when I do sessions on emotional intelligence is that people who are emotionally mature are curious about the emotions of others. So let me go back. So stimulation, like, that person just, for example, this woman. Now I'm going to tell you now, I didn't have as much knowledge and as many skills. This was 10 years ago. And I've learned a lot since then. But if I look back, I could say, not that I wouldn't be upset, but why does she do that? There's this concept of approaching life as a reporter, which I love. Like, I wonder why. There are a lot of contributing factors that create connections. So again, go back to yours. I'll talk about mine too. There's genetic relationships. There, like parents, children, siblings, aunts, uncles. Okay, there's the genetic part. Then there's a legal or a social relationship. So that could be marriage, those types of things, guardianships. Then there's just proximity. Proximity could be if you're working in a building, you know, if you're working in a hospital and a clinic and you're all working there together. It could also be neighbors. Then there's familiarity from, I have a hard time saying that word, okay, familiarity. So sorry, I don't know why I can't say that word. There's the commonalities that you have. You share interests. Maybe you're in a group together, in a church together. And then there's this concept of intimacy. Okay, everybody, I'm going to watch. You tell me, when you hear of an intimate relationship, what do you think that means? Okay, what is an intimate relationship? And I see some of you positive psychology. Yeah, 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 yeah. All right. So some people think of intimacy as romance, sharing secrets, close relationships, emotionally closeness. So I'm seeing a lot of closeness, personal to you, close emotionally, someone you allow into your inner circle. This is really funny. If you ever do an activity with friends, we did one in a women's group that I'm in about our circles. And interestingly, the women in that circle, two of them did not have me in their inner circle. So I don't really know what that means. It could be a sexual relationship. That's true. But there is this element of closeness, right? Whether it's physical, emotional, there's this element of closeness. Well, I'm going to change that just a little bit. So when we look at intimacy, okay, ready? Intimacy is feeling safe to be vulnerable and being able to trust another person with that vulnerability. Now, I think a lot of what you said alludes to that. But there are levels. And this is the part when I first started teaching about relationships, this was very interesting to me, very interesting to me, because beyond all, when I teach anything about relationships, and I hope that you all feel this way, I want it to be about opening up my mind to not being as judgmental as I am to other people's behaviors or to closing myself off to possibilities. And so I'm going to read word for word this next sentence. The level of healthy intimacy varies from person to person and from situation to situation. So let's look. And then I'm going to put, this is where the really interesting conversation comes in. After I go through this, I'm going to put an example up and ask you a question. So there's situational intimacy. Whether by choice or not, we are vulnerable with others due to certain situations. For example, if someone calls in sick, resulting in the manager, the team, they now know something about us. That's a level of vulnerability. Do you see? Because we called, or however you do it, and we shared that information. So we're vulnerable that we're trusting this person that we are sick. Then there's relational vulnerability. And this applies to situations and connections with interactions that impact those within that context. So, for example, understanding how to recognize and support a coworker or a family who is having a bad day or needs something, or a friend. This is a type of intimacy we often have with coworkers. For example, on our Teams meeting, I just started full time actually with Support Link in June. I've done contract training with them for 2.5 years. And they asked me to come on as a full time facilitator. And I still have my outside speaking business, but we have a Teams meeting in our department every week. And that's where we talk about, we have someone who lost someone in their life. We have someone who was traveling and had some difficulties. So oftentimes relational vulnerability is what happens with coworkers. And then there's personal vulnerability, or sorry, personal intimacy. This is usually chosen. It's voluntary. And a lot of you said that, but let's back up. Relational may not as much be, I believe we have choice in everything for the most part, but really, like, I'm not choosing who's on my team. I'm not the hiring person. So it's not really by choice. But personal intimacy is usually by choice, and it's usually voluntary. And this is the level that often includes disclosure of personal things that people at work or just people that you haven't chosen to be that intimate may not know. Okay, for example, you may not confide Like, I confide to everybody that I was in a psychiatric hospital, that my mental health is still a journey. I am an open book when it comes to that. But if you have experienced something like that in yourself or your family, you may not be willing to share that with anyone um, that you don't consider to be personally intimate. Okay, now let me see. Letting down barriers, I do love. All right, here we go. So here's the question. And again, I'm sorry if we don't get to everything, but at the end, if there was anything that you asked in the thread that's just coming through very fast and you want to revisit it, then we'll be able to do that at the end. So here's the question. One of your coworkers has very different political viewpoints than you. To be honest, it's difficult for you to find many areas of commonality. And simply put, you don't like each other. However, this person can be trusted to do what they say they will do. They're consistent and reliable, even if that reliability is to be a jerk in the break room. I think that's supposed to be funny. Your ability to do your job is dependent upon and enhanced by this person's job performance. So the question is, do you have a level of intimacy with this person? All right. And for now, if you would just say yes or no, that would be great. I mean, you can say yes in a level or something like that, but I won't be able to take time to see all of the things. Okay. So I'm seeing some yeses. I'm seeing a lot of yeses. I'm seeing, let's see, to a certain degree, yes, but very small. I see several no's. This is kind of what I see, gosh, quite a few no's. Then I see yes, yes, professionally. I see yeses. I see a few emphatic no's. And let me see. All right. So for now, we'll just kind of jump off of there. Yes, some different no's. Here's the thing. And it's this was tough for me when I first started. It really was. I'm like, no. And let's back up again. Let's go back here. Intimacy, intimacy, but let's go back to the definition. Whoops, I went a step too far, went the other. Well, good grief, I'm just giving you all the whole thing when, here we go. Feeling safe to be vulnerable and being able to trust another person with that vulnerability. So with this person, here's the part that makes this. Now, it doesn't, if you're not on board with it, it's okay. I'm just trying to open up your mind to the fact that there is a level of intimacy here, because it says the person can be trusted to do what they say. Now, we added the jerk part. I'm assuming I didn't write this scenario, but it was just to say, okay, let's be real. Let's all talk about the fact we don't like each other. This is the way we talk about people we don't like, but they can be trusted. And your ability to do your job is enhanced by and dependent upon this person. So there is a level of intimacy. Now, what is that level? It's relational, because you're at work. You probably are not going to trust this person with anything about your family life or anything about your personal life, I would venture to guess. But when it comes to your job, it seems like there is a level of trust that you have with that person. And the only reason I spent so much time on this is this session is a little bit similar. It actually has quite different content, but it's similar, it's underlying to like difficult people, because most people don't come to a healthy workplace relationships webinar if all of their relationships are great, unless you're just trying to learn more, and maybe you do. But I just am always a person of saying, you know, I want to open my mind so that when I'm having challenges with people, I'm not closed off. So I'm not saying you're closed off, but I'm going to stop talking now and let's go on to the next one. So let's look at, so we've talked about what a relationship is, but I mentioned to you that it's not just you and another person. It was not just me and this person. There was so much more than just the two of us. So if we take a systems approach here, it helps us see the big picture. We're looking at, so a system can be the workplace, the healthcare system, the family system. It could be the financial system. I mean, a system can be many things. The health of that system influences the health of the individuals in it. And I will say, okay, so think about yours with the system of this seminar company. It was not really set up for success, meaning there were no introductions. They would randomly assign who got the rental car. There were so many things that did not set us up for success. And we had these minimum expectations for selling from the back of the room. But who was selling? Which books were they selling? So this definitely affected the way that we function together. And then the whole, you all said jealousy. Okay, so there was no way of looking at what are the expectations for who comes to what session. I mean, it was absolutely just by choice. And so there's a lot of things that could set us up for success or failure. And so just looking at that system, is there micromanagement or is there open management? There's so many things. Just be open to knowing that it affects the quality of the connection, which it did with us. Now, let's go from the system to you and me. So not only does the system influence us, but we also contribute to that connection. So looking at a few things about the system and us, accountability and responsibility apply to everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and share something with you. If we are part of a situation, then we are part of the situation. I appreciate, now, by the way, I set you up. You know, I set you up when I said, well, this is what she did. Why do you think she did it? I told it to you in an emotional way because it was a very emotional situation. But there were a couple things I didn't tell you. Like I said, she didn't like the car. She didn't like my shirt. She didn't like my the GPS. She didn't like the books I chose. But if I'm part of a situation, I'm part of a situation. So I got together. I encourage you to become good problem solvers. I got together with some people when I got back and we worked through this together. Now, when I shared it, everyone said jealousy. Well, she's just jealous. She's just jealous. She's just this. But I will say that assigning something like that, this is just free from me to you, but assigning something like that can make things worse because I don't know if she's jealous, first of all. And second of all, if she is, can I fix that? I mean, that's a very emotional thing. So we came up with, the problem was she was criticizing me sometimes publicly. So what I didn't tell you was that when we got the car, so this was 10 years ago, I think 10 years ago, GPS is not, it might have even been a little bit longer. GPS is fairly new. She was 20 years older than me. She got in the car with MapQuest, like, and she was a little frustrated by the directions on the GPS. And at one point I was like, fine, we'll just take it off. The second thing I didn't tell you was that when I said she didn't like the books, she came down one morning and I was setting up the books and she said, oh, well, why do you choose those books? But you know how sometimes your mind hears it differently? My mind heard, why do you like those books? And so I said, well, do you want to choose the books? So I had some things too. Accountability and responsibility apply to everyone. And that even includes if we just let things happen. Maybe we're not doing anything actively to contribute, but we just let things happen. So do you see how the system kind of didn't set us up for success? And then our behaviors didn't as well. However, I will say what she did in that room that day, completely unacceptable because it was in front of our people. Second thing, intentions and outcomes are very different concepts. So just trying to remember that our intentions may be good, but sometimes the way that they pan out are not great. Like her intention may have been to help me in that room with something called power phrases, but that's not the way it came out. Disagreement and compassion can coexist. Powerful lesson for me. Compassion, that it wasn't that she was mad about the GPS, it scared her. She didn't understand. You all know how when you're driving down an interstate and it will tell you to stay on for 100 miles, but she said, well, no, my MapQuest is 200 miles, but it says 100 because there's going to be a split. And I just found that so annoying that she didn't understand that. I learned so much. everyone's perspective is valid to the person holding it. Everyone's perspective. We're going to come back to that. And everyone's needs are important. So I hope those are a few things that you think about. Now, I'm going to show you, this is a YouTube video. It is not part of your presentation. I would encourage you to visit Crucial Learning. Crucial Learning, they have given me permission to use whatever video I want. Another trying to open up your mind here, at least it was helpful to me. It's how to listen to anybody. And she's pretty kind of in our faces about it, but in the chat or question, let me know what you think about this. Here we go.
How can you really listen to someone who you don't respect? This is a question that honestly, I'm getting more and more. And if you're asking that question, you're probably not gonna like my answer because this is it. You can't. You can't have a meaningful, crucial conversation with someone that you don't respect. But the issue, it's probably not theirs, it's yours. Because you've chosen to villainize someone, to dehumanize them to the point that you don't even respect their basic humanity. If you've gotten to that point, I would encourage you to step back and say, why would a reasonable, rational, decent person do this? How can I respect something about them? Where can I respect even their basic humanity? Now, let's say that you can get some respect for the person even if you don't respect their views. How can you start to listen and have that conversation? Well, you've got to get curious. You've got to care enough to say, I'd like to understand where you're coming from. Sometimes, literally, I have to pretend that I'm like a journalist or a documentary filmmaker, and my job is to try and tell their story, to try and understand what lived experiences did they have that brought them to this place of belief that is so vastly different than mine. I want to be curious about what their experience is and how they came to those beliefs. Now, the other idea I have for you is that sometimes when I'm listening to someone who has beliefs that are quite different than mine, and that I'm struggling to really kind of buy in and listen, one of the things that's holding me back is that I don't think they're going to listen to me, and that doesn't feel very fair. So here's what I do. I contract up front. I say, I would really like to listen to your point of view. I think it's very different than mine. I'm curious, if I listen to you, would you be willing to openly and honestly listen to me? Most of the times, they're going to say yes, and then you're off, right? Ready to go. Now here's what happens though. You listen to them, and then when it comes time for them to listen to you, they don't. If that happens, remind them of their agreement. If that doesn't stop them, well then you can draw a boundary and walk away from the conversation, knowing that you held your boundary, that you listened to them, and that you demonstrated respect for them as a person. Thanks for watching.
Okay, thoughts. Yes, it says, okay, so I'm reading a couple of things. I want to back up to someone earlier that's, because she said the word too, with the person we talked about in the scenario, someone said big, firm boundaries with something like this, and she said it too. Boundaries are so important. So it's not that we're letting people walk all over us. It's that we are trying to be confident in relationships, be heard, be able to not put the other person in a villain role, which is exactly what I did when this happened with me with this person. And some of you said good reminders. You add tone to their words, start reading into things. And when you're in a negative place, you can really focus on something positive, trying to move to the positive. Good reminders, it can be hard to do. It's amazing the impact of emotional feelings and how it changes our thoughts. It's up to us to foster within ourselves what we seek within others. I love the contracting idea. I love the journalist. This is what I mentioned earlier. So it's, when I teach webinars about anything like this, I always start with laying the foundation because it's so important. I could give you, I love the idea of the journalist. I'll listen to you, then will you let me talk? It's just, it's about words. I'm going to share this book with you after I go off full screen. It's called Power Phrases. It's the one that changed my life. So even I can give you all of the tools in the world, but if we don't have a place where we're really processing what's happening, then they're not helpful. So as we think about these healthy workplace relationships, I just want for you to understand we have a couple more things to do, and then I'll give you a few more tips and tools, but a variety of factors influence how the concepts we've talked about are manifest. For example, like the flavor of the relationships, the interactions. Is it our boss? Is it someone that we like to interact with? Is it someone that typically we have positive relationships with? And this influences how we go into that connection. And that's exactly what happened with this person. When I told you that, I said, well, would you like to choose the books? We had history, and our history was not positive. So my mind heard things in a negative way. So hopefully those are some things that have spoken to you. All right, a few more things. We're going to explain each of these on a subsequent slide, but now we're talking specifically. So we've looked at what a relationship is, what intimacy is, levels of intimacy, factors that like healthy systems versus healthy individuals. Now let's look at the qualities of a healthy connection, like with you and the other person. So we're going to talk about each of these really quick on a separate slide. Change and growth, DEIB, and conflict. So let's look first at diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I don't have a lot to say about this because I think this quote says it all. But what we need to do is learn to respect and embrace our differences until our differences don't make a difference in how we're treated. And I think that's so beautiful. Like we are always going to have differences. Always going to have differences. So just definitionally, in case anybody's unclear, diversity is simply recognizing that people are different. Equity within that is providing supports that people need to be healthy and successful based on those differences. Inclusion is creating a system where everyone with these differences can contribute. And then belonging is really what this quote says. This sense of how all of this comes together and it helps us to belong. So that's an important component of healthy connections, embracing those differences. And then there's change and growth. Change is such a normal part of life. Lack of change means we're boring, we're stagnant. It's been very interesting. I don't know about you, but my work has changed over the years. I haven't worked for a company in a long time. Now, during the pandemic, I did too, because I lost all my speaking business, like within days, gone, all gone. So I took a job back in sales and training that I had done before for 2 years, and then speaking came back. So I was with them, but it was sales. I was pretty independent. You know, I would do a lot on Zoom because we couldn't travel much, but just sales and training. But now I'm part of the team. And so when I think about the change, this is a big change for me. I'm accountable to this team. They're accountable to me. We need to work in harmony. And it has grown me so much. I mean, I don't know that I was stagnated overall, but I certainly had a lot of things to learn. And so as we grow, healthy systems adapt to support that growth. So what I'm saying is, with you in your position, and then of course with me and that woman, as we grow, which we did, and I'll end with that in a bit, then the system becomes healthier. And then people are in our lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. This woman, and I think somebody said this before in the chat or the question, we were not going to be besties. We never were besties. But I do want to just end this story before we move on to, well, you know what, let me finish this last slide and I will. And in fact, as soon as we worked together, I don't know how many times. And then after I left working with this company, we're not together anymore because you told me, remember, our relationship was simply based on work. It was based on that professional level of intimacy. Okay, so let me back up to make sure you know where we are. So we're looking at these components of a healthy connection. One is about our differences and embracing those. One is about always being willing to change and grow and learn, like watching a video where somebody tells us if we can't respect someone in any way, that's probably something we need to work on. And then finally, healthy conflict. All right, everybody, let's do one last big question in the chat box. When I say conflict, you think what? All right, I'm ready. Let's get them going. I say conflict, you think what? Sounds like a cheer, doesn't it? I was never a cheerleader. All right, I see disagreement. I see ew. I see arguments. I love ew. Frustration, difference of opinion. Ugh. Love that too. Uncomfortable, not on the same page, differing viewpoints, emotions and tension, opportunity to discuss having a fight or an argument, negativity, problems. Wow, flashing. Okay, opportunity. Now I have to stop because I'll get too hung up in all the things that you're saying. I hope that going forward, there's a book that I love. It's called A New Psychology for Women. It was written in the 70s. And she talks about conflict, new conflict versus old conflict. And she says, if we're constantly, the author is Jean Baker Miller, and she says, if we're always staring in a mirror, like a reflection of ourselves, then we're never growing. Conflict is simply, a lot of you said it, really, it's just a difference of opinion. It just means you and I see things differently. And in fact, if we get into an argument or a fight with someone, odds are it's because someone did not address the conflict early enough, and then it escalates. So, emotionally or healthy conflict doesn't have to be emotionally painful. Now, it can cause a little, right? It can cause a little bit of that adrenaline rush. It can, when we're getting ready to address something with someone and have a conversation, like in that room that day. I mean, my face got red, my adrenaline went up. It was emotionally painful, but remember, we had not addressed that we weren't getting along. It does not mean that the relationship is failing. We know that there's some research, especially for women, that if we perceive that a relationship is in trouble, our serotonin levels plummet. So there are many people, myself included, in years past, that feel if something is not right, then the relationship must be over. The relationship must be failing. And that's not what it means. That if it's rooted in respect, then it's healthy. And that's what I really loved about that video, too. It's rooted in respect. And then finally, that it is solution focused. Okay. So just can you think of, and you all are so story days, I feel like you've already said them, but if you have and you want to say them again so it brings them up, what are some ways that you've been able to work on DEIB, change and growth, and conflict? What are some stories that you have that you've worked on? Practice, lots of practice. Oh, and you said it in such a great way. You said in a safe space. If you are not used to building a healthy relationship and there's conflict, probably the best place to start would not be in a high risk situation, like with a boss. Maybe you send your food back at a restaurant, something that is a low risk. I think that's fantastic. And so I will tell you, ending off that story, still growing and working every day, me too. And it's practice. It's so much practice. Well, here's how this story ended off. I had been studying a method called FIRR, and it's just FIRR. I honestly don't remember where. I see your answers. I'll come back to them in a minute. I don't remember where I learned it. It was in the seminar company, but I don't remember. If you Google it, it's kind of hard to find. But it stands for facts, impact, respect, and request. And this is not really a communication webinar, but I still wanted to say it to you. So I knew I needed to have a conversation about that situation. See, we're talking about conflict here. I had used powerful language in the moment, but we still needed to talk about what happened because remember, we didn't have a healthy relationship and we were not serving our clients. So I scripted this out. I got in the car. We were driving. It was private. I was ready. I took a deep breath. And this is what I said. Now, don't hold up your fingers when you're talking to people, but this is so you can know. When I heard you say that I looked unprofessional in front of 100 women, it concerned me because I wasn't sure about our credibility. You're great at using power phrases. Maybe you were trying to demonstrate that. When you do come to one of my sessions, I would appreciate it if you would allow the women to answer the questions because they're there to learn. Does that make sense? And will you do that? So that was the end of it. Now, when I brainstormed with my friends, they made me aware of what I contributed. They told me that I should allow her to choose the books, even if she comes down later. They told me it might be good to allow her to navigate because of her concerns with the GPS. So we had the conversation. It was fine. Her response was, I was just kidding. Has anybody ever said that to you before? You know they weren't kidding, and they were absolutely kidding or not kidding. But that's fine. I wasn't really responsible for her response. I was responsible in a healthy relationship to do my part. So we worked together many times after that. We never became friends. We did not share personal details, but we were able to serve our clients better. And I would like to think that if this happened now, it would have been different. It would have been different. All right, let me see what you all said about times you've practiced. Practice creating and demanding safe space, working responsibly on responsibility, learning to set boundaries. Yes. And ask yourself the question too, why am I not setting boundaries? And we're going to look at that on I think our final slide. Practice conflict starts with help me understand. Stop, take a breath. So you're giving us a process here. Observe, plan, proceed. I love that. I love like the acronyms. Trying to be more solution based, taking the cotton out of my ears and on my mouth, a safe place to chat, not forcing them into a corner. Love that. Let me scroll down a little bit more. Yeah, the just kidding thing is that it's fine. Really great things that you all have brought up. And in fact, because some of you brought up a couple of things that I think are really important, this takes us to really our last slide before we have a couple recap slides. Just ask yourself, one of the complaints that I had about working with seminar companies is their marketing material, at least the one I worked with, SkillPath and national seminars. Their marketing materials literally said about some of the sessions, quote, no psycho mumbo jumbo, only real tips that you can take away today. This slide is why I believe we need the psycho mumbo jumbo, at least in part. And that's why I opened up with really trying to lay the foundations, because I can give you 10 slides of things to do, and none of them are going to help you if we don't figure out why things are happening. So what are your barriers? Is it habit? For me, it was habit. I told you I was in a psych hospital and I had no skills, no communication skills. I would go from silent to violent. Do y'all know what I mean? You might use the word passive aggressive, but it was even much worse than that. It's a habit. I didn't know any better. Is it trauma? Sometimes trauma holds you back. Remember, we said sometimes our serotonin drops because we think if there's any conflict, the relationship is over. Sometimes that comes from trauma. This is the way that you've lived your life. Communication issues. I'm going to show you this book in a minute. Please learn powerful words. It will benefit you so much. Is it unhealthy or non-existent boundaries? And again, when you're learning to set the book boundaries and that whole series, still fabulous. But look at why you're not. And oftentimes it comes to some of these other issues. And then finally, is it unresolved conflict? You know, one of the things that's interesting to me, I heard this phrase once, we shouldn't verbally vomit on people. Meaning, if you are upset with somebody and you have a year's worth of unresolved being upset, it might come out and just spew. So sometimes we need to start current so that we aren't telling a person everything that they've ever done in our lives to upset us. So ultimately, and we are basically at the end, and then I'll be able to, give you resources, and then I'll come back and look at all your questions. Ultimately, here's what gives us a healthy process for all of us. These are such great reminders and tips. Be intentional, be present, and listen. I heard that. I heard some of you say that. Allow appropriate expression of all emotions. My children told me, my husband and I have 8 children together. 3 of them are mine, and I raised them. My mental health did not become stable until they were a little older. And so they've told me as adults that I didn't allow them to express emotions, because it was like, no, you are not allowed to be mad. So as an adult, you might have been raised like that, so remember that all emotions are okay. Now, it doesn't mean that we allow poor behavior. but emotions are okay. Engaging in positive reinforcement, supporting structure and consistency in that relationship, encouraging independence. It may be that the relationship that you have is difficult because they're depending on you, and we need to try to help them be independent. Model good self-care and healthy choices. That is my actual PhD dissertation, is about the fact that the world tells us that the more we suffer, the more valuable we are. Therefore, if you make good healthcare choices, it must be nice. Please don't let the world tell you that. And finally, counseling and mental health support. It's always okay to ask for help. So just some signs of success. And you don't have to, you can write these if you want to, but just think about what you're looking for in your life. When you're developing these healthy relationships, we're going into the holiday season. I mean, aside from just work, when you develop these healthy relationships, just think in your mind, what do I want that to look like? In my situation with this woman, I wanted it to look like I wasn't being criticized in front of people. That was the main thing. I wanted us to at least have a professional relationship where our attendees felt like they were getting a valuable day. Okay, so think about, as a result of today, what would you like to focus on for the next 30 days? Is it boundaries? Is it communication? Is it opening your mind? Is it problem solving? Is it words? And there are so many things to help you. So let me give you these tools and then close with a little picture and quote and story, and then go back to all your questions. These interactive toolkits are put together by SupportLink, but they're available for anybody. So these are not member specific. You can send these to friends. These toolkits have several things in common. They have tip sheets, they have articles, and then mindfulness, meditation, and sleep fitness also have audio lessons, which is amazing. If you're not familiar with SupportLink, so we are your employee assistance program, or your EAP. And so this is not medical insurance, but it's a free benefit offered to you to just help you with challenges. Counseling is part of it, like referral to counseling. And there may be so many more benefits that you are eligible for. Depending on your plan, you might be eligible for a legal, financial, or identity theft consult. You might be able to get referrals for dependent care or convenience. There's so much. There are two ways to access resources. The one I'm going to recommend, at least in the beginning, is that you call the 888 number, and I would plug that number in my phone. It's answered 24/7, and somebody called a care advocate will answer and direct you and connect you to what you need. The second thing is to go to supportlink.com or scan the QR code. Your login code is PSH, and then you'll be prompted to set up your own account. The reason for that, people who live with you full time, including your children, have access as well, and you can have separate accounts. And the other reason is so you can access all of the things that you get in the member portal. All right, you have 2 pages of additional resources that you'll get when you get your PDF, and you have a plan as to what you're going to do. And then I love to put things into artificial intelligence. So I put healthy workplace relationships. I also love to play music. And I found this quote, and I don't know where I got it. So sorry about that. But I think I want to end on happy and say a healthy relationship is one where 2 independent people just make a deal that they will help make the other person the best version of themselves. So that is what I have for you today. And now let's go back and look and see what questions that you have. Let's see, the name of the site that I mentioned. Oh, okay. So the name of the YouTube website is Crucial Learning. Crucial Learning. And they have a ton of videos on different workplace topics. FIR is facts, impact, respect, and request. Fact, impact, respect, request. Okay, so I see a lot of still interesting things that you've commented on. Let's see, 100% we need positive psychology. Yes, 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 yes. I'm going through, and I'm just talking while I'm looking for any other questions. I'm going through a 10-week module to become a certified positive psychology coach. And I have a podcast, and I decided to do it with my listeners. So I'm on module 7, and it has just been so incredibly healthy for me. I encourage you all to, and some of us, I don't know about you, but we might be prone to think that we know everything when in reality, there's a lot to learn. Okay, power phrases. The author is Meryl Runyon. She does not publish anymore, but you can get her book on Amazon. And I don't know if you can see I shared my story with her about what happened with that woman. And in the back, there are these sections: power phrases to express your anger, power phrases to diffuse and respond to someone else's anger, acknowledging comments without agreeing, accepting compliments, asking for help. It really, really changed my life so much when I learned that I could speak up. And the YouTube channel, again, is Crucial Learning. Crucial Learning. Okay, what else? And the book name is Power Phrases. Power Phrases. Sometimes we just need to have some language. And that's so important. I think for years, if you've ever taken a communication class, you've probably heard it said, it's not what you say, but how you say it. Well, I get that, but it is definitely what you say as well. And I think because of that, we don't always develop powerful language. Oh, I'm sorry that some of you have to leave, but thank you for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, my podcast is Consider Yourself Hugged. It's about mental and emotional well-being. And it's on all of the Apple, Spotify, it's on all the podcast things. Okay, what else did I miss? And I know that they want to, Angela wants to close it out at the end. Oh, Jean Baker Miller, her book is A New Psychology for Women. A New Psychology for Women. Sorry, sometimes I just think of these things while I'm talking and it just comes in, and I don't have it in the presentation. A New Psychology for Women. Okay.
Well, thank you so much. That was such a wonderful presentation, a lot of great resources. And as you mentioned throughout, we are sending a follow-up email. It will include the PowerPoint, a link to this recording. So stay tuned for that within the next day or so. That will be coming to your email inbox. And so if you like today's presentation, Dr. West will actually be back with us in November, on November 19th, talking about the attitude of gratitude, as well as December, which we will promote next month as well. So huge thank you, Dr. West, for being here today. Thank you to everyone who took an hour out of the day. Yes, absolutely. And we will see you next time. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks. See you next month. Bye. Thanks for everything.